everyone, I am Balagbis and I'm going to be discussing the continuation of the report of Ms. Ferreras. My assigned topic is all about lexical semantics, semantic rows, and sentence semantics. So what are you waiting for? Just listen and learn. We are getting into semantics again. If you use word, there's a very great things we're doing in this interpret with supporting aids or help demand. So today I'm going to be discussing about the continuation of the report of Ms. Ferreras, the lexical semantics, and let's start with antonymy. The word antonymy derives from the Greek root anton, meaning opposite, and denotes opposition in meaning. It contrasts to the synonymy and eponymy. Antonymy is a binary relationship, but it can characterize the relationship between two words, only two words, at a time. The prototypical pairs or antonyms are pairs of adjectives describe opposite notions: alive and dead, big and small, fast and slow, happy and sad. Terms A and B are antonyms if, when A describes a referent, B cannot describe the same referent, and vice versa. The nouns male and female are also antonyms because an individual cannot be described by both terms at once. Always and never form antonymous pairs of adverbs because they have mutually exclusive referents. The verbs love and hate can also be viewed as antonyms because they refer to mutually exclusive emotions. Antonymy is thus a binary relationship between the terms with complementary meanings. Well, there are two types of antonymy: gradable and non-gradable. If terms A and B are gradable antonyms, and if A and B can be used to describe a particular referent, then B cannot be used to describe the same referent, and vice versa. If A and B are non-gradable antonyms, the same conditions apply along with an additional condition. If A cannot describe a referent, then that referent must be described by E or by B rather, and vice versa. So male and female, married and single, alive and dead can be viewed as non-gradable antonyms. Hot and cold, love and hate, always and never are all gradable antonyms. Typically, for the gradable antonyms, there will be no words to describe intermediate stages like sometimes, seldom, occasionally, often are all gradable, or gradations between always and never. The distinction between gradable and non-gradable antonymy is sometimes violated by language users. In English, for example, it is reasonable to assume that whatever is alive is not dead, and whatever is dead is not alive, and thus that the adjective dead and alive form a non-gradable pair. However, we do have expressions like half dead, very alive, and more dead than alive, which seem to imply that in some contexts, we see alive and dead as a gradable antonymous pair. The distinction between the two types of antonymy is thus not always observed by native speakers, but it is nevertheless useful in that it describes an important distinction between two types of verb relationships. Okay, now moving on, let's discuss polysemy and homonymy. The two additional notions that are closely related to the basic relationships types are polysemy and homonymy. In contrast to the notions discussed earlier, these two notions refer to similarities rather than differences between words and their meanings. A word is polysemic when it has more than one meaning. The word plain, for example, can have several meanings, among which are A, easy or clear, another meaning is undecorated, another meaning is not good looking, and another meaning is a level area of land. Plain thus is polysemic. Two or more words are homonymic when they sound the same but have different meanings. The word I, and I are homonymic. They have different meaning but are identical in spoken form. These two notions are useful when dealing with relationships between words and meanings. Languages exhibit polysemy and homonymy in their lexicon to varying degrees. A language like Hawaiian, for example, which has a restricted set of possible words because of its phonological structure, has a great deal more homonymy than English. Another difficulty arises in distinguishing between polysemy and homonymy. Now, when do we know that we have separate lexical items rather than a single word with different meanings? Because plain, a level area of land, is a noun. It is a distinct word from plain in the first three meanings, all of which are adjectives, right? How would we know whether or not the other three meanings of plain are different words that happen to sound the same? Use of spelling criterion is misleading. Many sets of words are obviously distinct but have the same spelling, as for example, the sound, which means noise, and the adjective sound, which means healthy. Or on the other hand, we have bank, which is a financial institution, or a bank, which means a shore of a river. Yet the problem is an important one, especially for anyone who wants to arrange or use the entries of dictionary in which different meanings of the same word are grouped under a single entry, but each homonymous form has a distinct entry. There is no simple solution to the problem actually. If there is a clear distinction between polysemy and homonymy, it must involve several criteria, none of which is sufficient by itself and of which may yield different results. We have already excluded spelling as an unreliable criterion. One modestly reliable is the word etymology or history origin. We can consider that there are two words of the form or of the word sound corresponding to the two meanings given earlier because they derive from different Anglo-Saxon roots. The word bank, with the meaning financial institution, is an early borrowing from French, while bank, which means the shore of a river, has a sense of an Scandinavian origin. The various antonyms and synonyms of a word provide second criterion that we may use to distinguish between polysemy and homonymy. The word plain, in its meaning, which means easy and clear, and its meaning, which is undecorated, both have a synonym in simple and antonym in complex. The fact suggests that they are indeed two meanings of the same polysyllabic word. This fact suggests that they are indeed, or there is no common synonym or antonym that can be found for the two meanings of sound. Finally, we may ask synonym or antonym that can be found for the different meanings of what appears to the same word. The first two meanings of plain can be characterized as devoid of complexity, which suggests that they are related. We can find no hypernymic description for bank and bank. Thus, plain in these two meanings is polysemic, while the two meanings of bank reflect homonymous lexical items. Of course, other meaning of plain or may not belong to separate words. While the criteria just outlined help discuss or distinguish between polysemy and homonymy, they are not always foolproof. It is often difficult to decide whether a particular pair of looking alike and sound alike word forms are separate homonymous or simply the same polysemic word with different meanings. Though homonyms and polysemy can be distinguished as different notions, the boundary between them is clear-cut. Now, moving on, let's have metonymy. Metonymy is a relationship between two words that is based on daily life experience. That close connection can be based on container-content relations. For example, bottle and Coke, can and choose, or a whole part relation as in car wheels, house roof, or a representative symbol relation, for example, king crown, or president, White House. Next we have metaphor. The difficulties in defining the distinction between polysemy and homonymy partly arise from the fact that language users often extend the primary meanings of words to form metaphors. A metaphor is an extension of the use of a word beyond its primary meaning to describe referents that bear similarities to the word's primary referent. The word eye, for example, can be used to describe the hole on the dull end of a needle, or bud on a potato, or a center of a storm. The similarities of these referents and the primary referent of the word eye are the roundish shape and their more or less central location on a larger shape. Language users constantly create new metaphors. Once a metaphor becomes accepted, speakers tend to view the metaphorical meaning as separate from its primary meaning, as in booking a flight, tabling emotion, understanding a concept, seeing the point, stealing the headlines, buying time, studying a foreign tongue. Hence, difficulty exists in determining whether we still have one word with two meanings or two words with different but metaphorically related meanings. Metaphors are not formed haphazardly. Observe, for example, the following metaphors that refer to the notion of time. First, we have, I look forward to seeing you again this weekend. Experts do not foresee an increase in inflation in the near future. He drags up old grudges from his youth. Once in a while, we need to look back over our shoulders at the lessons history has taught us. A pattern becomes apparent in these examples. In English, we construct time metaphors as if we physically move through time in the direction of the future. Thus, the future is forward in the first two examples. Metaphors that refer to the past use words that refer to what is left behind, as in the latter two examples. Metaphors that violated this pattern would sound very strange. Another principle that governs the creation of metaphors is the following: ideas are objects that can be sensed. Thus, ideas can be smelled, felt, and heard. Like for example, your proposal smells fishy. I had failed to grasp what she was trying to prove. I'd like your opinion as to whether my plan sounds reasonable. Writers and critics often talk about the writing process as cooking. Like for example, I let my manuscript simmer for next 6 months. Who knows what kind of a story he is brewing? Or, her last book was little more than a half-baked concoction of earlier work. The heart is where the emotions are experienced. Is a common principle in which we base our metaphors for emotions. Like for example, it is with a heavy heart that I tell you of her death. One should not speak lightheartedly about this tragedy. Or, the rescuers receive the survivor's heartfelt thanks. The construction of metaphors does follow present patterns. Most metaphors discussed so far are relatively conventionalized, that is, they are found in the speech and writing of many language users. Not much creativity goes into the use of conventionalized metaphors because they are preset. But language lends itself to creative activities, and language users do not hesitate to create metaphors of their own. Here are a few examples on the theme of grief from losing a friend. The loss of a friend is a heavy heart or heavy weight to carry. The loss of a friend is a dark cloud over one's life. The loss of a friend is a severe blow. The loss of a friend reaches into the depths of one's soul. The loss of a friend can trigger serious thinking about one's own mortality. To what extent do the principles of metaphorical extension vary from language to language? There is strong evidence that some metaphorical patterns are frequent across the world's languages. For example, in many languages, the word for eye is used metaphorically to refer to roundish objects like protuberances on potato, or the centrally located portion of an object like the center of a swarm. Now let's come to semantic roles. Semantic roles are properties that the noun phrases have according to their meaning inside a sentence. The semantic roles are agent, theme, instrument, experience or experiencer, location, source, and goal. Let's have agent and theme first. Take a look at sentence number 1. The boy kicked the ball. In the sentence, the person who executes the action is called agent. The agent in the sentence is the boy. Next, we have instrument and experiencer. Take a look at sentence number 1. The boy cut his hair with the scissors. In the example, we can notice that there is a tool that helps the agent to perform the action. That is the semantic role of instrument. Take a look at sentence number 2. He felt happy about cutting his hair. When the action is related to a feeling, a state, or perception, the agent takes the name of the experiencer. Let's move on to location, source, and goal. Let's have sentence number 1. The keys are next to the vase. Sentence number 2. She brought some souvenirs from France. Sentence number 3. Marco traveled to Merida tomorrow. In the first sentence, the text in yellow marks are semantic role of location. In the second, the semantic role of source. And in the third one, the semantic role of goal. Let's finally move on to sentence semantics. We have noted that, like words, sentences must carry meaning for language speakers to understand each other at all, but the meaning of the sentences.
The following sentences have different meanings even though they contain exactly the same words. Sentence A. The hunter bit the lion. Sentence B. The lion bit the hunter. Clearly, summing up the meaning of each word will not retrieve the full meaning of sentences. Such a process will not even distinguish between these two sentences. In defining what the meaning of the sentence consists of, we must need to take more than just on one meaning of the individual content words into consideration. What notion must we turn to? Consider the following active and passive counterparts which at the level of referential meaning at least describe the same situation. Sentence C. The hunter bit the lion. Sentence D. The lion was bitten by the hunter. These sentences have the same deep structure, but they differ in that of the derivation of the sentence D involves passivization, whereas sentence C does not. Since our concern here is with meaning, we must ask how to account for the synonymy between the two sentences. Furthermore, consider the following sentences. Sentence E. Seymour sliced the salami with a knife. Sentence F. Seymour used a knife to slice the salami. Here, the situation is not unlike the passive and active counterparts of C and D, in that the sentences have the same referential meaning, but E and F do not have the same deep structure. We have no transformation that would explain how E differs from F. Nevertheless, we need to describe how sentences E and F mean the same thing.
A slightly different situation is presented by the contrast between the following examples. Sentence G. Harold was injured by a stone. Sentence H. Harold was injured with a stone. These sentences share some properties. For example, both describe someone being injured and a stone being involved. But they are not completely synonymous. If the stone was part of a natural rock wall, only sentence G applies because H implies that someone threw a stone at Harold with intent to do harm. Now, how can we describe such meaning differences? The three situations just presented all suggest that the crucial factor in the way sentence meaning is constructed is the role played by each noun phrase in relation to the verb. We thus need to introduce a new notion, that is semantic role of the noun phrase. What is this? Well, this refers to the way in which the referent of the noun phrase contributes to the state, action, or situation described by the sentence. The semantic role of a noun phrase differs from syntactic role, which are objects, subject, and so on, as illustrated by the contrast between sentences C and D. In both sentences, the way in which the lion and the hunter are involved in the action is the same. Even though, for example, the lion is a direct object, C, and the grammatical subject of the sentence, D. Semantic role, furthermore, is not an inherent property of a noun phrase, since a given noun phrase can have different semantic roles in different sentences. The first semantic roles we need to identify are the role of agent. Agent means the responsible initiator of an action, and of the patient, which means the entity that undergoes a certain change of state. In both the C and D above, the agent is the hunter, right? And the patient is the lion. That the sentence describes the same situation and hence have the same referential meaning can thus be explained by the fact that in both sentences, each noun phrase has the same semantic role. The role of the subject noun phrases in the following sentences is is that of the agent because Hilda is not really responsible initiator of the actions denoted by the words. Take a look at these sentences. Hilda likes blueberry pancakes. Another sentence, Hilda felt threatened by the lion. In both sentences, Hilda is experiencing a physical mental sensation. The semantic role of Hilda is the experiencer, defined as which received a sensory input. In English, experiencer can be subjects or direct objects depending on the verb. For example, the bigger key opens the door to the cellar, which is instrumental. In the other sentence, the snow caved in the roof, which is the cause. So the noun phrase, the bigger key, is indeed an instrument. Why? Because this is an intermediary through which agent performs the action. On the other hand, we have snow would be assigned the semantic role of cause, which is defined as any natural force that brings about the change of state. In addition to an agent, a patient and experiencer, an instrument and a cause and a noun phrase can be recipient. Recipients means it receives the physical object. And a benefactive, what is a benefactive? So benefactive is for which an action is performed. On the other hand, we have locative. Locative is the location of an action or state. And then finally, we have temporal, which is the time at what the action or state occurred. Take a look at these sentences. I gave Hilda a puppy. So Hilda here is the recipient of I, which is the subject, and what Hilda received, that is the puppy. Second sentence, Harold passed the message to me for Hilda. Hilda is the benefactive because the message that was passed by Harold to me was for Hilda. Next we have the Midwest is cold in winter, so it's locative. Where is the winter is cold? It's in Midwest. And then the last sentence, she left home the day before yesterday. So when did she leave the home? That is the day before yesterday. So the day is temporal. That is all about my discussion. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something from my report. Thank you so much.